Good evening. This analysis covers a Fox News segment featuring correspondent Jonathan Hunt reporting from Tel Aviv, and Iran's parliament speaker Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf warned the United States against a ground invasion, threatening to set American troops on fire and step up attacks on U.S. allies, according to Iranian official media. Specifically, Ghalibaf said Iranian forces were waiting for the arrival of American troops on the ground to set them on fire and punish their regional partners forever.
Iran is issuing a sharp new warning to the United States. Iran's parliament speaker says if U.S. forces launch a ground invasion, Tehran's troops are ready to, quote, set them on fire. The threat comes as thousands of U.S. troops move into the region, and Pakistan's foreign minister says it will soon host talks between the U.S. and Iran. Chief correspondent Jonathan Hunt is in Tel Aviv with the latest for us. Jonathan.
John, a U.S. ground operation may be on the way, and it could happen very soon. That is doing little, though, to deter Iran from continuing to attack Israel and its Gulf neighbors. A missile slammed into southern Israel near the town of Beersheba today, sending a huge plume of gray smoke over the area. Apparently it was some sort of chemical facility that was hit. Local residents were told to keep their windows shut and their air conditioning off because of the toxic fumes produced as a result of that strike. Meantime, the U.S. continues to hit targets throughout Iran, missile launchers and military manufacturing installations among the most recent targets for U.S. aircraft. As those 2,500 Marines you mentioned arrive aboard the USS Tripoli, they would be probably the spearhead for any sort of U.S. ground operation that President Trump decides to order. But Iranian officials are saying they are ready for whatever the U.S. does next, and they are mocking President Trump's decision-making. Listen here.
At one moment, he speaks of negotiations, and shortly afterward, he decides to manage the war. This unbalanced and deceitful individual has inflicted extensive damage on the people of the United States, Europe, and countries around the world, especially the countries of West Asia.
Israel, meantime, is also focusing on the northern front here, its battle against Hezbollah in Lebanon. Prime Minister Netanyahu said today that he will expand what he calls a security zone into southern Lebanon. He calls it expanding a security zone. Many others call it an invasion, once again, of Lebanon. John?
Plenty of controversy in the United States about the Iran war. What about in Israel? Is there a consensus there?
I think in this wartime moment in which the Israelis find themselves right now, they back the idea, certainly, of regime change in Iran. They back the idea of crushing Hezbollah in Lebanon, but they don't want this to be open-ended. The Israeli people, John, are absolutely exhausted. They have gone 3 years, of course, 3 years and more, since the attacks of October 7th, with, it seems to many of them, unending war. And I think what they would like to know from Prime Minister Netanyahu is when this will end, how it will end. And it will be interesting as we go forward this year. Netanyahu is under a time crunch for the elections. He has to call elections here by the end of October. It will be interesting then to see how the Israeli people react to what he has done over the last 3 years and how he prosecutes these wars in the coming months. John?
All right, Jonathan Hunt reporting live from Tel Aviv. Jonathan, thank you. For more on this.
What the segment did not fully convey is that Ghalibaf is not just any Iranian official. Israel is said to have removed Ghalibaf from a list of potential Iranian targets, and he is reportedly the individual with whom Trump claimed to have been indirectly negotiating on terms for ending the conflict. Ghalibaf is described as one of Iran's few surviving major political figures following weeks of strikes that killed Supreme Leader Khamenei and other senior officials. This duality, Ghalibaf being both the man threatening American forces and the man reporting reportedly authorizing oil tanker passages is a critical detail. Trump told the Financial Times that Ghalibaf was the one who authorized the ships to me, referring to oil tankers passing through the Strait of Hormuz. This paints a picture of someone performing wartime rhetoric for a domestic audience while potentially engaging in back-channel diplomacy, a nuance the segment largely missed. A fragment from a ballistic missile launched from Iran struck a chemical plant in Israel's Nayat Hovav industrial zone on Sunday, sparking a blaze and prompting concerns of a hazardous chemicals leak. The IDF Home Front Command issued a warning to civilians near the zone to remain indoors. Israel's Environmental Protection Ministry stated that the possibility of hazardous chemicals leaking was being investigated, but that at the time there was no expected risk to nearby towns. Separately, another Iranian attack saw a missile hit an open area in Beersheba, injuring 11 people from flying debris caused by the blast's shockwave, shattering windows in nearby homes, with roughly 100 homes suffering damage. The segment described this accurately but glossed over the broader pattern. Analysts say the targeting of such facilities signals a potential shift in Iran's military posture toward economic and industrial disruption, rather than solely symbolic or military targets. This is a significant escalation in strategy that deserves greater attention. U.S. Central Command confirmed that about 3,500 additional soldiers arrived in the Middle East aboard the USS Tripoli on March 27th, along with transport and strike fighter aircraft, as well as amphibious assault and tactical assets. Captain Wells' analysis about potential missions, Strait of Hormuz clearance, Kharg Island seizure, and nuclear material recovery aligns with reporting from multiple outlets. Administration discussions have touched upon the possible seizure of Kharg Island and raids into coastal areas near the Strait of Hormuz to find and destroy weapons targeting commercial and military shipping. However, there is a crucial addition the Pentagon itself made the day before this segment aired. According to the Washington Post, the Pentagon is putting together plans for weeks of ground operations in Iran, but decisions on whether to green-light operations now rest with President Trump. The White House explicitly maintained ambiguity. Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said the Pentagon's job was to make preparations in order to give the commander-in-chief maximum optionality, and that it does not mean the president has made a decision. Netanyahu said he had ordered the military to further expand its operations in southern Lebanon, citing continued rocket fire by Hezbollah. Israel said last week it was enlarging a buffer zone up to the Litani River, though it was not immediately clear whether Netanyahu was referring to that area or to the seizure of additional territory. The reporter Jonathan Hunt appropriately noted that while Netanyahu calls this expanding a security zone, many others call it an invasion of Lebanon. The facts support this framing concern. Since March 2nd, nearly 1,200 people have been killed and more than 3,400 have been wounded in Lebanon. Israeli forces have destroyed or damaged at least 8 bridges near the Litani, prompting Lebanese President Joseph Aoun to call it a prelude to invasion. Israeli strikes have killed 51 Lebanese health workers since March 2nd, according to the WHO, including 9 paramedics on Saturday alone. Foreign ministers from Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Egypt gathered in Islamabad on Sunday without U.S. or Israeli participation, as Pakistan sought to facilitate direct talks between Washington and Tehran. However, Pakistan later said the diplomats had departed for their home countries, and the talks that were originally scheduled to continue Monday ended early. Ghalibaf described the U.S.'s 15-point plan as merely Washington's wishes, and said the Trump administration is attempting to do through the plan what it has failed to achieve by force. Meanwhile, Iran's state broadcaster Press TV reported that Tehran had drafted its own 5-point counter-proposal. This segment focused narrowly on the U.S. Iran military dynamic. Here is what was not covered: the Houthi escalation. The Iranian-backed Houthi rebels' entry into the war could threaten shipping on another crucial waterway, the Bab el-Mandeb Strait to the Red Sea. This opens a potential second maritime choke point. Iranian authorities say more than 1,100 people have been killed in the Islamic Republic. In Iraq, where Iranian-supported militia groups have entered the conflict, 80 members of the security forces have died. In Gulf states, 20 people have been killed. 13 U.S. service members have been killed. Iranian officials reportedly warned that Israeli and American universities in the region would be targeted unless the U.S. condemned the bombing of Iranian universities. One of Iran's oldest universities was bombed by U.S.-Israeli forces on Saturday. A recent poll shows 62% of Americans oppose deploying ground troops to Iran, while only 12% support the measure. This was a stronger segment than many I've reviewed. Jonathan Hunt, reporting from Tel Aviv, provided clear on-the-ground context and correctly noted the language gap between expanding a security zone and what many consider an invasion of Lebanon. Captain Bob Wells offered professional military analysis that was measured and consistent with publicly available defense reporting. However, this segment still suffered from a recurring pattern in coverage of this conflict. It treated the war primarily as a strategic chess match, discussing force positioning, island seizures, and mission capabilities, while underweighting the human toll, the global economic fallout, the domestic opposition to escalation, and the diplomatic paths that appear to be narrowing with each passing week. The most important development this segment hinted at but did not fully explore is the paradox of Ghalibaf. The same man threatening to burn American soldiers may be the only person left in Iran's power structure with whom a deal can be struck. That tension between war and diplomacy is the story of this conflict, and it deserves far more airtime than it received.